Hello, my name is Jacobson and I have this problem which is known as buying and collecting obsession. This has been going on for many years and it's about me constantly buying new, ever more advanced cameras. I buy a camera, I play with it for a while and then I sell it with a loss, almost always with a loss. But sometimes I don't sell at all. This, for instance, this Sony Mavica, which I bought back in 1997, was for some reason never sold. I can't remember why, and now I think it's too late. Who wants to buy a 25-year-old digital camera? Because this is, I believe, the oldest digital camera that I own. Yeah, I could show you also my newest digital camera, also from Sony, which I have here. This is the A7C R. And if you wonder what A7C R stands for, I think the C stands for compact and the R for resolution, because this is a very small and very compact camera with a high 61 megapixel resolution. Over the years, I've bought many new cameras from Canon, Nikon, Panasonic, Olympus, Sigma, Leica. But in this video, I will only show you a few cameras from Sony. And especially I think it's interesting to look at the difference between these two cameras, the A7C R on the left and the Mavica on the right, both produced by Sony, but 25 years apart. The full name of my first digital camera is MVC-FD7. You probably wonder what that means. Mavica is a camera that Sony started producing in 1981, but in the beginning it was not digital. It was a magnetic video camera, Mavica for short. But the Mavica I have here is digital. So it's not only my first digital camera, but it's the first digital camera that Sony released. And while MVC stands for magnetic video camera, the FD stands for floppy disk. This is because the camera uses removable magnetic disks for storage. Back in the 1997, when I bought this Mavica, all digital cameras had a huge problem. They used a limited and very expensive built-in memory that made it difficult to get the photos out from the camera to the computer or to the printer. You have to use some awkward cables to transfer the file from your camera. Or, well, I say awkward because there were no standard solution, no standard cable, no standard memory card, until Sony came up with this solution, which was so cunning and so simple. Just record your photos onto a standard 3.5-inch floppy disk. This, my friend, was the future. It's not the future anymore, of course. But if you lived for a while and you remember the good old 90s, you may recall that every computer had a 3.5-inch floppy drive at that time. And I think also every office had stacks of these laying around. Even many homes had stacks of these laying around. They were cheap, and when you used them to record your photos from your camera, and you took the disk out of the camera and put it into the computer, you had directly access immediately to your photos. No cards, no cables, no software, no fuss. Each of these floppy disks can store 24 images. And that, incidentally, is exactly the same as a film roll at that time, 24 images. Or some film rolls were 36 images. To write the image onto the disk in the camera took 10 seconds. And to read it from the disk took 5 seconds. With new Sony cameras like, for instance, this ZV-E1 or ZV-E1, I don't know how you pronounce the ZZ in English. With these cameras you use mostly SD cards, which are much smaller than floppy disk, of course, and which can take much more storage. This little SD card of 256 gigabyte can store 100,000 floppy disks. It equals 100,000 floppy disks. And in the Mavica, it took 10 seconds to write an image onto the floppy disk. This little camera, the ZV-E1 or ZV-E1, can take 120 images in 1 second. That is in 4K. And if you're content with a little bit lower resolution, high definition, HD, you can take 240 images in a second. That is in so-called S&Q mode, slow and quick mode. Of course, the size of the images of this Mavica is also something totally different. It's not even close to 4K or HD. It's actually only 0.38 megapixels, to be exact. And when it's compressed to JPEG on the camera, it's reduced to 60 kilobytes. That's ridiculous, right? 60 kilobytes. Well, the images from this Mavica are actually 640 times 480 pixels. That doesn't sound like much, but you have to consider that the normal resolution on a computer at that time in the 90s was 640 times 480 pixels. It's exactly like the images from this camera. It was a resolution known as VGA, which stands for Video Graphic Array. And it was a standard that IBM introduced in 1987. I bought this Mavica because in the 90s I had an art gallery, and the art gallery had web pages where people could see all the paintings and all the artworks that we sold in the gallery. This camera was so useful at that time because before I opened a new exhibition, I could snap photos of all the artworks and publish them right away on our web pages without any editing. It wasn't even necessary to reduce the size of the JPEGs because 60 kilobyte was perfect for the internet at that time. So perhaps my gallery was the first in the world to publish and sell art on the net. But when people asked me to print the images that they saw on my webpage, or the images of paintings or sculptures that they had bought, I had to disappoint them. I didn't want to print images of 60 kilobytes. Then I had to take an analog photograph and scan it and print it. That was the only way. And some people say the same about this camera, the ZV-E1 today. You cannot print the images, they say, because this camera has only 12 megapixel images. I think you can print them, but 12 megapixel is much less than most cameras today. So this is not a camera made for photographing prints. That's not what it's made for. It's more like a video camera. But there are similarities between these two Sony cameras. For instance, you're looking at the screen instead of through a viewfinder. That was quite revolutionary at that time when the Mavica came, and it's also unusual today because most cameras even today have an optical viewfinder. You may say that these two cameras are more like mobile phones because they don't have this viewfinder. Another similarity between these two cameras is that they don't have any mechanical shutter. And the weight is quite similar, 500 grams each, but you have to put a lens on this ZV-E1. And on this camera now I put a 24mm f2.8 lens, which is a weight of only, I think, 165 grams or something. So this setup, this ZV-E1 plus the lens, is less than 700 grams. The lens on this Mavica is a 4.2 to 42mm lens, which equals in full frame terms 40 to 400mm. In other words, this camera is a so-called super zoom. This A7C A7CR is not much bigger than my ZV-E1, even though it has a resolution that is 5 times higher. And it also has a traditional viewfinder, as you can see here. These cameras are both supposed to be weather sealed, but when I look at them, I think the A7CR looks more rugged. The ZV-E1 has a zoom rocker on the body in front here, so that you can zoom in and out with a lens with a motorized zoom, which is like this. This is a motorized zoom, a 16 to 35 millimeter f4, which has an internal zoom with a motor. That's why I use it often on this ZV-E1. The Mavica also has a zoom rocker and a kind of, you may say, motorized zoom, but it's a totally different thing, of course. But here you have this button here where you can zoom in and out. So that's another similarity. Otherwise, they're totally different, as I said before. Maybe you didn't notice, but in the clip you just saw, I did not use auto framing, which is a feature that Sony introduced in the ZV-E1 and which is also in the A7CR. It means that when you put the camera on a tripod, like I've done now, and you start filming yourself, there is a frame within the picture that follows you as you move around in front of the camera. This might not only be fun, but it can be quite useful because it gives the impression that you have a cameraman filming you, even though you are alone. And you know, people today have an attention span like a goldfish. So you have to move now and then just to keep their attention. Otherwise the viewer may lose interest and he will start looking for some other video. By changing the field of view constantly, you may hold their attention. I hope I did now. I hope so. But that was a digression. What I was going to say was that here you could see the development of digital cameras from the Mavica in the 90s to the A7CR in 2023. I know for sure that I will not use the Mavica on a daily basis because that's ridiculous, 60 kilobytes images. But I'm not confident that I will use the A7CR on a daily basis either, because the ZV-E1, which I also own and which is filming me now. No, it isn't. This is the ZV-E1. I'm mixing up these cameras. They look alike. Well, the fact is that the camera that's filming me now is the A7CR. And this camera has 61 megapixel, which I'm not sure I need. You only need 8 megapixel to make a 4K video, for instance. And if you want to post images on the web or on the social media like Instagram or Facebook, you only need a couple of megapixels. So you have to ask yourself, why take these big images? Why fill up your storage like that? There are two reasons for that. First, you may want to print large images, which you can do with the, not this one, but the A7CR. You can print huge photos. And the other reason could be that you're the kind of photographer who like to crop a lot. And if you crop your images a lot, 61 megapixels is perfect. So on the other extreme, of course, from 60 megapixel to 60 kilobyte to 0.38 megapixels in this Mavica. So what do you think? Would you prefer the ZV-E1 or the new A7CR? Or perhaps you would like to buy my Mavica, my old Mavica. I'm willing to sell it to the highest bidder. But please remember, this is a collector's item. This is a 25-year-old camera, so it's not cheap. And I'm selling it with all the original accessories, like this strap with Sony on it, you see? And this very chic bag for storage I have here. You can put the camera in a in the bag, and you have like a strap for carrying here. And you also have the manual. You can put that inside the bag, and then you have all the instructions for how to use the camera. I have the battery charger, which still works, while the battery does not work that well because it's 25 years old, but you can buy a new battery. It's no big deal actually. So please leave your bid in the comment below and tell me what you think. And meanwhile, thanks for watching.